Let's call to order. And a roll call, please.
Mike Davenport.
I am here.
Christopher Espinoza.
He will be joining us by phone shortly, we hope, if we can grab him.
Oh, okay, thank you. Jenny Hagstrom.
Here.
Terry Pavicic.
Here.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Here.
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
Scarlett O'Hara.
Here.
Jade Toledano.
Here.
Thank you.
We have a quorum. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to start with student board members' questions and comments. I'm just going to close this door.
Oh, I can start.
It's a little noisy.
Do you want me to start? I can go first. It's okay. I'll start. So since I last updated the board, many things have been going on at South. Winter sports are in full swing. We've all started our seasons. So we wish all the teams good luck as they continue their seasons. One event that I want to highlight in athletics happened this past Saturday, December 4th. It was our Evans Elves Night hosted by our boys basketball program. Evan Malau unfortunately passed away during a couple years ago in the summer, so he was part of the football and basketball program. So the basketball program honored his memory by collecting donations of gift cards and toys to give to local families in need during the holiday season. This past week was full of concerts and art shows by our many students in the fine arts department, so it was amazing to see all of them show their talents. I would also like to congratulate the cast and crew of our winter play, which was Rose in the Rhine. It was amazing. It was very unique and a different experience, and I know many of the students enjoyed seeing it. And then finally, I would like to congratulate the 210 D99 students who were recognized as Illinois State Scholars. It's an amazing accomplishment, and we're all proud of them. And this week, all our students are gearing up for that last final push of the semester. It's finals week, and I know we're all looking forward to that break. So just good luck to all our students as they take their final exams, and we can't wait to see all that we accomplish in the new year.
Fabulous. Okay, so I haven't updated you all since November, so it's been a while. So back in November, we had our Veterans Day event, which is something that we always do at North, and due to COVID, we did have to change it up a little bit, but it was still awesome to be able to accommodate some veterans from our community into our school and be able to sit down with them and understand their stories. I helped organize the event, and it was a great opportunity. It's always one of my favorite events of the year. So that was great. And then also our fall sports did come to an end, and they all did fantastically well, and I'm very proud of them. And our winter sports have started up too, and they are doing so well as we start this season. Going into our fine arts programs, our one-act plays, The Black Box Chaos, did very well. Our cast and crew did very well on that. We're very proud of them. Also in our fine arts, we got the official invitation to London's New Year's Day Parade, which is very exciting for all our fine arts. The band and choir programs will be joining that event, which is something that I think is such a great educational opportunity for us to be able to give our students. I know the last time it was done was my freshman year, and a lot of my friends did it, and it was a great opportunity for them, and I'm very excited that we get to do this again. Last week, Mosaic Week, best week of the year in my opinion.
It was great.
Yes, it really was. I think within our fine arts, it's so amazing to be able to see how our fine arts programs unite between both schools to be able to do these concerts. Like I know especially our orchestras do both concerts at North and South. It's a busy week, but it's so worthwhile because you get to see people from our community come in to see these concerts, and also just former alumni come back and support their friends and their teachers and the programs overall. And I think that is something so amazing that we're able to do. We also had our congressional district representative come and visit us a couple weeks ago, Sean Caston. I got to see him speak during our fourth period. It was a very educational opportunity. I think it's great that our students are able to meet with our congressional representative and understand and ask questions and be informed about how everything's working within our government. And I think that's a very valuable experience. Yesterday, North hosted a vaccination clinic, which I know our superintendent was at. I saw a picture of a bunch of our superintendents locally volunteering, so thank you for doing that, Dr. Thiele. Also, last month, we did lose one of our students at DGN. Senior Daniel Figueroa Arabaran passed away, leaving a community mourning. And our school culture has always shown great resilience, kindness, and a deep sense of empathy. And that's something that I'm always thankful for. So my deepest condolences go out to the Figueroa Arabaran family, and they're in our thoughts. And as Scarlett also said, it's our final week. There's one more push. We're just doing our finals, a lot of exams. It's stressful, but after this, it's going to be a recharge to start off next semester strongly. And I think we got this. And similarly, congratulations to the 210 D99 students recognized as Illinois State Scholars. I know you were one of them. I know you were one of them too.
Excellent, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Nobody was surprised by that.
Yeah, shocker.
I know. No, I think, but it shows like how much like effort our students put into our academics,
Yeah.
and I think that's something to be extremely proud of. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, any questions or comments for Jade or Scarlett?
I just want to say the Mosaic concert was fabulous.
Thank you.
So it was really great. And I was sorry I couldn't make it to South High, but I did make it to North High.
Yes, North's was amazing. South's was so
South?
good too. So good.
Yeah.
It is always amazing to me how much talent we have
Oh,
and how many students are involved. I mean, all the music students, but it's the choir, it's
And then the art
arts
display.
and
Arts with like
Yeah.
our
technical,
exhibitions.
and it's just
Yeah.
an amazing, it's the majority of our student body is really.
Yes.
It was wonderful, and it was wonderful to experience the South High concert in the auditorium in the Fine Arts Center instead of the gymnasium.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I got to hear Jade perform there, as well as my niece, so it's excellent.
I 100% agree because I feel like in the new space in the auditorium, the sound quality is just
Yep.
amazing. It really is.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. I have to concur. It was fantastic. But I also want to say, hearing both your reports, especially during these times, is a breath of fresh air. You are so uplifting and positive. Thank you. I love it.
You're here.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, ladies. Okay, we're going on to the approval of minutes. We need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the minutes of the November 15th, 2021 business meeting and the November 15th, 2021 closed meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Terry and Joanna.
Thank you very much. Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler,
Aye.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom,
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye. The minutes carry. Next, we'll move on to the reception of visitors. The meeting agenda includes 2 opportunities for comments from the audience. The first reception of visitors is intended for audience members to address the board about any agenda item on which the board will vote. I believe we have the voting. Do we have the agenda up there?
Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. The second reception of visitors is intended for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes to provide all visitors an equal opportunity to address the board. Individuals needing more time should submit their thoughts in writing to the board secretary, Mrs. Nydak. Visitors addressing the board need to submit a comment slip to the board secretary and will be invited to the microphone. Prior to addressing the board, audience members should state their full name. The proceedings are being tape recorded for the purpose of producing accurate meeting minutes and are being streamed. And I reserve the right to modify these protocols as circumstances warrant. Audience observation of these protocols is appreciated. So do we have anybody who wishes to speak?
Don't know if anybody else was planning on turning in a slip. We have 7 so far, only 1 checked for the first item, but it isn't for an item that is listed as an action item, so that'll move to the second reception of visitors. Otherwise, we have nobody that's indicated an action item that they wish to discuss.
Okay. We'll move on to the recommendations and reports of the superintendent, the 22-23 curriculum proposals.
All right, and I'll turn this over to Gina.
Thank you, Dr. Thiedling. So I'm excited to say that we have 4 courses coming to the board this year. We have a science course, 2 coming out of our CTE department, and an intervention course. These courses, we bring new courses every year to the board in December as students begin signing up for courses very soon after we return. So the first course is environmental sustainability.
Who do I need to get your? Environmental sustainability, right.
And I have Mike Hines, our Downers Grove North Science Department Chair, who will share information with you about this new course.
Good evening, Board of Education.
Hey, Mike.
Thank you for, once again, allowing us to come to present to you a course in which we want to expand the opportunities for students in the science area in CTE99. We've been to you a few times in the past few years. I would like you to, if you would look at the description of what we have here, where we find ourselves today with the environment and the concerns that our students present to us and that's out in the community. We feel that the more that we can do to bring environmental, not just topics to students, but an opportunity for them to come up with innovative ways for solution-based class in which we have healthy food, healthy water, clean air, clean soil. Oftentimes when students are problem solving, they're not encumbered by a lot of the baggage that we as adults come with. And so they are often open-minded and come up with really neat, creative ways to solve problems. If you go to the next slide, please. Again, this is, rather than if you think about environmental design, I don't want you to think about it on the macro scale where we're doing engineering. This is more of a biotechnology course in which we're looking at electrophoresis, DNA extraction, like that we have right now, we have P-Glow. It's a way to look at possible new ways of designing foods that grow better, a way of soil cleaning in which we use native plants, maybe to pull out heavy metals from soils. That's what we're looking at along these lines with the biotech component of this. They'll design and engineer solutions for drinking water, food supply, and renewable energy. This is a course that we would like you to think of. We have a Bio 2 right now, Bio 2 research topics. This will be replacing that course. That course, while it is a topic-oriented course, it's not so much the innovative solutions as we find in the Project Lead the Way courses. And so that's really what we want to do is grab this curriculum from there. As you know, we already have a biomedical careers pathway on the books where we have principles of biomedical science and human body systems. We've had very good success with our students jumping into these classes and really, really enjoying these. And what, not just how that's presented, but what the materials that they're getting really do create career pathways for students. So that's really why we're really super excited about this. People say, well, why wouldn't they just take AP Environmental Science? This is a non-AP level class in which students can get in and work with students of all ranges and levels. And then again, just a description of the difference. As you know, College Board at the end of the AP course, they can take an AP course to get college credit. Project Lead the Way also offers college credit for an end of the course assessment. It's not the same as the AP College Board giving that credit, but it is from a college or university that then they can transfer the credits to at the end of the course.
All right, questions for Mike?
Questions?
Why is it non-credit, Mike?
Excuse me?
Why is it non-credit?
Non-credit to graduate?
Yeah.
The reason that we do that is, as you look at the Illinois Learning Standards, it doesn't cover all of those performance expectations that the Illinois Learning Standards set forth for us. And that's why we hold the biology and chemistry and as our core courses in which students gain credit for graduation.
Any other questions for Mike? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next course is a CTE course, Accelerator for Entrepreneurs. And with that, I will turn it over to Patrick Fardy. He is our CTE Department Chair at South High School.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. Again, thanks for, as Mike said, thanks for allowing us to come in and talk about some of the classes that we want to be able to, add for our students. The class that I want to talk about tonight, the Accelerator EDU, is based on a second-year course built in after the students take the Incubator EDU course that we brought up last year. The students right now are taking the Incubator class for the first time. They are loving it. They've had some great ideas. I'll give you a quick example. I know it's South. One of the groups, they have an idea of trying to sync up books to movies. So like, if you like certain genres of books, what movies might you like? And they actually reached out and got in touch with Netflix, and Netflix said, yeah, we'd love to talk to you. So just some really good things are happening in that class. So the way that Accelerator works is that it's based on this idea that once a student at the end of the incubator class, they've done their pitch and they're, Sharks, this is a great class. They've got an opportunity to even get seed money potentially for their idea. The accelerator is the second year of the program where now they can actually, during the class period, they run their actual business. So they're growing customers, they're learning about creating an LLC from this customer idea, they're learning how to create contracts, agreements with their customers, and they're really building up that business throughout. So as you can see, again, the three kind of components for the curriculum is the formation of the company, establishing the legal entity, customer acquisition, the production of the product, and then the process that they go through with the business. The market traction, figuring out how they're going to actually educate and connect with potential target customers, and then obviously iterate and scale their company as needed to keep it sustainable growth. In order to take the class, the students had to have taken incubator, and they also had to have received funding at the end, or they may be hired on by a team that got funding. So sometimes what may happen is you may have a group that goes on, but maybe two of their members were seniors and they graduated. Well, there could be a junior who is in another group and really wants to take Accelerator, that opportunity, so they can get hired on, let's say, by the other group and join to kind of be in that Accelerator program still. So again, it's for juniors and seniors only. And the idea that the way it's built in is that most likely it will fit within the incubator class. So we're talking about a smaller group of students generally that will move on. So most likely we see it as kind of that the class within the incubator class. The accelerator and incubator will probably both be within the same period of students.
Okay. So,
And then,
can I just ask a question? I know the incubator class was really popular. About how many students do we have in it?
So the incubator at South right now, we currently have one section of it, and then which is about 24 students. And then North has two sections of it.
Wow.
about double.
So, and they're both pretty full from my understanding.
Yes.
Thank you.
And they're presenting, I think,
Which is
what,
Wednesday.
Yeah, it's
Wednesday
and
and Thursday, to the foundation, I know, and other groups to get funding for this. So this is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited.
All right. Our second CTE course that's being proposed is 3D Design and Animation Studio. And with that, we have Melissa Damewood. She is our CTE Department Chair at Downers Grove North High School. And with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Thanks, Gina. So we're really excited about this class. This is our 3D design. And so when we put this together, we wanted to put in a few examples. So who's ever the clicker, if you feel like clicking on the videos, we can see a little bit of that animation at play. But if not, then that's okay. You know, life isn't perfect. But we thought that'd be a little, let's see if it works. We'll see. But basically, we'll see. This is slow, you guys. Oh, well. So anyway, what we noticed is this is our capstone course in the digital media graphic animation career pathway. This pathway is exploding. When we looked at the data and statistics on what this career path would look like for our students, we were even blown away. And so we were really excited to offer this. A little background, currently at South, they already are offering this as kind of an independent study. And so we already knew that we had a lot of students that were interested in this, so we felt really good about bringing it on as a class at both schools. And so you can see some of our possible areas, and then I put a little quote down there on what we know is going to happen for them, because we're looking at movies, video games, visual effects in general. Everything's animated. All we have to do is notice that every single one person here probably has their phone. All that phone has graphic animation. Next slide. So what we wanted to be able to show you is kind of how the progression. So most students would start out at 3D Design Animation 1. On occasion, we'll have a student come in with already a background where we might start them in 2, but it's rare. It could happen. So in general, they start at 3D Design Animation 1. We use professional software. So we're using the 3ds Max software. This is what every professional is using in the industry. So this is a huge piece of software. It takes time. So then we offer 3D Design Animation 2 where we build, and then we offer 3D Design Studio. In general, our students right now who are taking this as the independent study, it is where they're building their portfolio to apply to colleges and universities. We're really pleased to report that our students who are doing this right now are getting into really rigorous, high-end design programs at the collegiate level because they're coming in with this great portfolio of work. Next slide, please. So, our stats. So, in general, 3D Design Studio is eligible for grades 10 through 12, but I'll be honest, it's typically seniors and juniors who are taking this class. The credit is about a half credit, but they can repeat it. They need to have taken 3D Design 1 and 2, and if need be, it can be collapsed into 1 or 2, just to make sure that we're meeting every student's needs, but we're still keeping our course numbers at a healthy place. And I'm sorry that my animation's not working. Some of it's pretty cool, but I'll tell you what, stop by any time, and the kiddos will be happy.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. So this is all, yeah, I was going to say, the kids created all of that. So they have to create all those pieces to come together. So we're really, really proud of them. Super excited to bring on this course. Oh, there we go.
Oh, perfect timing.
Any
There you go.
Any questions that I could answer for us? We feel pretty good? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
So our last course that's being proposed, you may recall several years ago, we proposed freshman, sophomore seminar. This is to complement that series, advanced seminar. And I have Associate Principal Aaron Ludwig, Dr. Aaron Ludwig, newly Dr. Aaron Ludwig, from Downers Grove North High School to talk to us about it tonight.
Good evening. So Advanced Seminar would be a course that's in our intervention strands, both at North and South. And as Gina said, it is a complement to our freshman, sophomore seminar strands. Those are really courses that are meant for students who need executive functioning support daily and need that kind of advocate and check-in during the day. So it's designed for students who have a continued need. There's not a student who maybe has moments throughout the school year where they need the support. CSS member can check in with them, or we have some groups that we're running too that do executive functioning supports. These would be students who have shown a need for a little bit more, for a daily check-in. We look at it as a flexible and continuous intervention. So what I mean by that is a student could take that and then graduate out. It could take 1 semester for those skills really to become a solid part of who they are as a student. But there's other students who 1 semester may not be enough, and we need a little bit more practice and a little more support, little scaffolding to get out of the nest. And so we want students to be able to take them again if they need to. Because it's part of our freshman, sophomore strand, there could be a student who is taking seminar for a couple years as they are at North and kind of getting that skill set. I can speak specifically at North that we found Advanced Seminar, because we did do a pilot last school year, we found it to be really, really beneficial for our juniors and senior transfer students. Because what we were finding is that the transition of being a transfer student itself can cause some recalibration of your student success and like getting the lay of the land and what it means to be successful at the school. But then also, it was a better placement than trying to place a transfer student who was older in a freshman, sophomore seminar class. Different skill sets, different levels of maturity. And so it really gave us a place to support those students who are a little bit older. And like I said, we piloted it in 21-22. Just was talking to Melissa Damewood in the hallway about some of the end of semester data for her kids. We've met with the seminar teams to talk about vertical alignment. We've also met to talk about exit and entry criteria to make sure that if a student is placed in this during the day, it's a right intervention for them. It's meeting the exact need. And we're also talking about how we are using that hour and maybe graduating them out so they can get an elective. And so it's something that we're going to review at the end of every semester. There's lots of conversations in my inbox right now about students and placement and whether or not a seminar is continued as appropriate for them. We'd also like to offer it as a pass-fail option for select students. You know, it's an intervention course that we are recommending, and so we want families and students to have the option of whether or not they want that to be a pass-fail or not. We don't want that to be a barrier for them considering something that we think is appropriate for them. So again, the data so far is really good. Advanced seminar kids, juniors and seniors who need this skill set support are very different than freshmen and sophomores. And so it's allowed us a grade level, age appropriate intervention for them throughout the pilot. So I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the interventions.
I think they're great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ludwig.
Thank you.
All right. Questions for Gina before we trade her out for Mark?
Sounds good. Thanks, Gina.
Yeah, I always like to see these new courses because a lot of them you'd like to take,
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
you
Every time
know?
I see it, I think I wish I was back in high
kidding.
school. Then I think about it and think, no, I don't.
Practice.
Yeah,
Do it all over again.
because I'll tell you, there was nothing like this available when we were in school.
Definitely not for me.
No,
I did
so
take
it's exciting.
advanced,
Painting?
no, advanced,
Metalwork?
putting into stone.
Oh.
Notes in stone.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
All right, before we get to Mark,
Chisel.
return to in-person learning. No official updates yet. This is, each month we've been updating the board on a number of cases. Last month when we talked about how for the beginning of the year, the average numbers that we were seeing was under 20 close contacts per week, less than 5 cases per week. You can see just as society's numbers have increased over the last month, so have ours. Still relatively reasonable in comparison to other schools in our area, so it leads me to believe that the combination of the high vaccination rate amongst our student body, as well as our students are really following the safety protocols, with fidelity. When I walk past classrooms, I see masks on, I see kids distance from one another. Lunchrooms, obviously kids are eating, so masks are off, right? But so far, we seem to be keeping things well under control at school. You can see the numbers of our staff spiked a little bit as well. So we had 2 in August, which was a shortened month, obviously. And then 6 in September, 4 in October, and then we jumped up to 11 in November. We are a segment of society. We kind of mirror what's happening outside. But overall, I think we've done a nice job of keeping our kids and our staff healthy and safe throughout this school year. One other thing, we had a meeting with IDPH on Friday and Dr. Ezike. As I shared with the board, there was several topics discussed. One of interest is potential exclusion and quarantine guideline changes coming up sometime in the future. There was no date given or even promise that that would happen, but it was nice to hear that there was a discussion around many of the topics that we as superintendents have been advocating for months. So at least we know that our concerns are being heard by the IDPH. We'll just see if they result in any changes moving forward. So if any of those things happen in the coming weeks or months, I of course will update the board and public as those things occur, and it'll cause us to reevaluate all of our practices as those things happen. So any questions?
Do the positive tests, do they continue to be mostly centered on extracurricular sort of things, or are these in school?
The positive tests, not necessarily. The close contacts that we track at school track to either lunch settings, because then you're not maintaining distancing and masking, right?
Right.
Or extracurricular settings.
Okay.
So it's rare for us to have a close contact in a classroom setting. Happens now and then, but it's definitely rare in comparison to the other two, the lunch setting or extracurricular setting. Other questions? All right. Tax levy, Mark?
All right, once you're heading forward to the graph.
Yeah.
So this has been to a board meeting in December. You've seen this, and I've used it for 20 years or more. So hopefully you've...
With new numbers.
Yeah, yeah. Every 6 years I change the numbers on it. No, this was a tough one, but what we know is it's a balance of what we don't know and what we're hoping for and what we're really estimating. On the far left side, what is known is we do know, of course, last year's, the 2020 calendar year, assessed valuations. It's part of the formula here. And we do know that the 21 levy tax cap, that today's levy, approval that I'll be looking for is locked in at 1.4%. That was the consumer price index for December of 2020, and, I'm sorry, 21, and is the limit that affects our levy. And it's the lowest it's been since, I think they're saying the 80s, late 80s. So it's a really shockingly no number. The difference is, since it's starting at such a low point, getting back to normal and even above even is the more recent cap. And I said that is actually the calendar year 2020.
2020.
Limit. The 2021 is already peaked past 5%, which is a tax cap of 5%. It's always the lower of the CPI or 5%. And this is the first time that we'll have seen next year's levy go out at 5%. It'll be capped at 5%. So we 1.4 is pretty low in particular. If you consider we're going through some inflation right now, and $1.40 doesn't buy what it used to buy, so it's going to be difficult. But the saving grace here is some things that we do know. We do know that the Downers Grove TIF, the Tax Increment Financing District, has matured this year, and any new growth, so whatever the assessed value was when they started this 23, 24 years ago, anything that has grown over that period of time now comes to us as new construction, and we're able to extend our levy onto that property. So it's a big increase. So it's really helping us in a year where we can use it with a 1.4 CPI limit. So we don't know exactly. We did request information for the amount, or what amount of assessed valuation it's increased to in the village. And I have two different numbers, one from the county clerk and one from the township assessor, and it's because they measured them at different dates. So, I mean, at the higher one was the assessors. It was more recent, and so I'm using that, and I'm adding 90% to it as a cap. So I know that we're going to get all of that that exists. And then the other thing we get is new construction dollars, which we get every year, some new construction. Someone puts a second story on their house, does something unique to their property, increases the value, it gets added to the tax rolls, and then eventually a year or so later we get to start taxing that portion, and it's new. And that's really the only true way someone's assessed value and tax bill can increase, if they add something positive to their property. Now, it can go up because of inflation on that house or other things, but that's really the key way. And sometimes the rate will jump. Our rate has been dropping for the last decade. Current rate this year is $1.68. You can see upper right-hand corner. I expect it to be $1.63, so it should drop a little bit. The thing that there's an inverse relationship between that rate and home values, though. That $300,000 house, which we years ago decided was about an average for our community, appreciates every year. And so that appreciation and a drop in our value should measure itself out. And so by living at the level that we have out here, $87,777,000, most of that is to try and capture the new construction in the TIF. Some of it is to capture new construction that the assessors always give me new construction values for the year, but they haven't gone through the final phase, which is a board of review and some other things. Sometimes they get adjusted down, but it's the best number we can get at this point in time. And so we have to make some kind of judgment. And that's why the stuff in yellow is not, I don't think that's going to happen, but it protects us to those levels. What I do expect is on the right-hand side, and if you look at the lower right-hand corner, the total increase is on those properties 3.4%. 2% is attributable to new property. That's what I'm guessing would be. The average homeowner, though, will have 1.4% increase in their values, and the cost of them net to them on a $300,000 is $23 a year. So our 1.4% is really going to keep those tax bills down this year, because all the other money that we get out of this request is from new construction, that is new property being added, and it's not the average household. So it's a really good year for the taxpayers, and thank goodness for the TIF, it's a good year for us. So this has to be approved before the end of the calendar year, before the end of the month. So we're asking for it at this point in time. And then in March, we'll get a notice from the county with the actual new construction values, and we can put together our actual tax rate, and then they will use that for the tax bills that go out in June.
So I remind the board every year at this time that it's a system that's somewhat backwards, in which Mark and Jeree have to forecast what new construction will be worth, and then, based on that educated guess, go out and recommend a levy to the board. And if they guess wrong and we under levy, we never capture that property value back.
again.
Right? You have one opportunity to do this. So when Mark says we're levying what his best guess is, plus 90%, that's to ensure that all of that new construction we can't get the real dollar amount for yet is available to us when they give us the actual number in the future. It's backwards from how it should be, right? So
Yeah,
Mark works really hard every year to try to bring in that correct number for us.
And it's a really, it's a good process when you think about what, I mean, this is the first time I've at the beginning and the end of a TIF. You know, they go 23, 24 years. I'm usually seeing them mature from 20 years ago or something, and we've only had a couple. There's an Ogden TIF is still available.
Right.
But we haven't had access to the growth that's been in there. We assigned an agreement or agreed to the TIF being put in because we knew it was good for the downtown area and that eventually it would have this, as I call my seeds. These seeds grew and now they're maturing. So that's what we have here. It's done, and it should be a good thing for us. Hopefully the downtown area is appreciated by the community because they helped pay for that a little bit with the way that a TIF is designed.
Oh, and it comes at the right time. Who knew
Yeah.
23 years ago that our budget would be capped by 1.4% at a
Right.
time the economy is growing 6+%?
6.8, right?
You know, so it is showing up at the right time to help us keep up with inflationary pressures next year.
So this will be an action item, and we appreciate your approving it.
Questions
you.
for Mark?
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to bring in a team here for, discuss the school climate survey. Yeah. Tony, could you advance it? My clicker's not clicking.
Clicker's not clicking. There's going to be a joke there somewhere.
We're moving super slow all of a
Well,
sudden.
I'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. This year, we're continuing with our practice of issuing climate surveys, just like we did last year. And the purpose of these surveys, again, is to collect feedback and to make sure that our students have a positive experience at District 99. And like last year, we're again using the third-party firm called Panorama to help us with this. And they help us create the surveys and administer them to better understand our students. This year, unlike last year, we issued the student survey during the school day. So last year, everyone was remote, so kind of on their own. Parents, of course, were notified ahead of time, and they could opt out their student. Participation was voluntary. We also issued teacher, staff, and family surveys, all of which were anonymous and voluntary as well. So no slides for us yet. Okay.
Troubleshooting.
All right, that's okay. And decisions about the content were made by administrator teams. So, for example, Ed and Courtney went through the Panorama bank of questions and selected those questions to ask for families. And we did the same for students and staff and teachers as well. Okay, no slides, that's okay. Our response rates, of course, were higher for students compared to last year, since we were able to carve out time during the school year. So there are about 3,100 or so students who responded. Our response rate for families was very strong too, at 668, but not as high as last fall, which over 2,000 families responded. As you'll recall, we were talking about in-person and remote learning. I don't know if you remember that. So people had some things to say about that, which we read every comment. And the teacher and staff response rates were very similar that they were to last year. Also, and I'll show you the slides. All of the response rates or all of the responses are available on our website in full from the 3 last year and the most recent survey. So you can go in and anybody can pull that data and see it. So Scott was going to provide an analysis of the student. Do you want to sit?
Good evening. So I'll just go through the slide if it doesn't pull up. Well, there we go.
There we go.
So for the student survey, though, first I'd like to thank our building level teams, administration. So we at North, Aaron Ludwig, Kelly Zerner, and David King. And then at South, Sarah Corrington, Karen Taylor, and Kristen Borman. They were all instrumental in helping to select the questions, look at the themes, and kind of how we wanted to use this for the future. So, so you can see on the one slide it talked about our themes. What we're really excited about is the analysis breakdown, where we can take student data and look at it from a district perspective from each school. We can go by grade level or different groupings of students of like IEP, EL, and then obviously responding to individual student needs. So what I thought I would do is just kind of walk you through kind of a thought process of how we're going to be using this data. So the next slide, Tony. So one of the questions under our emotional regulation, which would be under our social emotional learning theme, was when things go wrong for you, how calm are you able to remain? And you can see the results. So our goal as we're thinking about our programming is obviously looking at are there things that we can do to respond to not calm at all and do that more immediate than future planning? But our goal is to really move all those up to obviously quite calm and extremely calm, because that's kind of our thinking as we're looking at this data. And then the next slide, I'll kind of walk you through our breakdown. So really from a district perspective, you know, this was the first implementation. We'll obviously have another one coming up in the spring. So as we do this year after year, in all those categories, we'll be able to look at longitudinal growth data. At the building level, in the immediate, we'll be able to start looking at our how can we use the data for our access intervention time, and also for professional learning opportunities. So to give you an example about professional learning opportunities, you know, we have a support staff professional development team, and so we're going to present the data to them to have them look at it. And I'm on that with our director of HR, Jeff Bergholtz. And so we work together with our support staff association, and really we'll look at and decide what are different things that might surface that we can offer professional development to improve our staff. Looking at it from a grade level perspective, you know, PBIS right now for Mustang Way and Positively North, we look at data each month, and we look at it from a 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, looking at behaviors, looking at how do we program for lessons, how do we program booster lessons. So this will be one great area that we can have a lot of data to look at. And then our SEL collaborative groups at both schools will also be able to look at that data. And then student groups, like I mentioned earlier, looking at students that are in special education, in our EL programming, you know, kind of looking at it from that lens, we can kind of dissect and see what kind of supports we can offer. And then also through CSSS. And then on the individual level, we're going to look, you know, we look at it, how do we engage students, you know, from a counselor's perspective, social work, our dean, or even teachers. So we're excited about, you know, the first round of data coming through. Obviously, we'll be interested in seeing the second part of it and then using that for even more programming for the future. So any questions on the student data before? Perfect. We'll keep going and we can answer questions later too.
So we also gave a teacher survey and a staff survey. And while they were two separate surveys and both anonymous, so it doesn't identify the teacher or the staff member, when we went through the data, we saw the same themes for both. And these surveys, like I believe Jill had said, were vetted. The questions were vetted with building admin. So for example, the teacher survey, I worked with our associate principals for curriculum and instruction, Ryan Doherty at North and Georgia Hash at South. And we combed through the questions to decide what questions we wanted to ask. As I said, the results were similar for both. And the majority of our teachers and our staff members reported that they do feel a sense of belonging, which is really important because that has been a huge district and school focus for us this year, as has been relationships for several years now. Most said that there was a positive working environment. They were obviously very positive about their experiences here at school. They have trust and believe that their school leaders really have the best interests of the school and students in mind. So we were very pleased with these results, especially being that the focus on belonging and the focus on relationships came out loud and clear through their responses. So for the family survey, again, anonymous. So we again gleaned through the data, and we saw that the majority of families also reported a very positive school climate. They believe that certainly this year their students enjoy going to school, that they are engaging in lessons in the classroom that are motivating, that they're learning, that there is an atmosphere of respect both in the classroom and in the school as a whole. So a very positive learning environment for their students. They also believe that the benefits of athletics and activities really help to promote that positive learning environment and that positive climate in the schools, and that they really help students to grow. In terms of talking about climate, they believe that we should add more opportunities for students, more social opportunities for students throughout the year. And then in terms of communication and our resources, again, we put a lot of resources in place, especially this year and last year as well, that our teachers are very caring and have high expectations, and that we are putting the resources in place to help our students to be successful. In terms of the value of the survey, I think we would all agree that the largest value, the most important, is that it identifies students in need of support. And as Scott said, at the individual level, at the school level, at the district level. So that is a key component of the survey.
Yes.
However, it does also establish some baseline data for us as we continue to administer the surveys. It also gives us an opportunity in data, an opportunity to look through the data and to use that data to better inform our professional development, whether that's for teachers or for staff. Scott mentioned working with support staff on professional development, and they will be looking at the data, as well as we will be sharing that data with our building admin that focus on professional development for teachers. Obviously, we will provide that data to various groups and staff members as we look at future planning. And as the board knows, we are working on our strategic plan, and this data is just a set of data to help inform and have additional input into that strategic plan. So next steps, sharing information, sharing the data to hopefully inform programming and interventions, and to see how we can use that data to better support our students. We are planning to administer the survey again in the spring, specifically in April. And we also see that the survey data can complement our new schedule in terms of the programming that we put into our access periods and into resource. So it will identify needs for us that can better inform those two times when we can work with students on some of their needs and various interventions. Questions?
Future surveys, will you be asking the same questions again? So this really does serve as a good baseline to then measure progress as we go forward. Excellent. And then in terms of the takeaways, when we say the majority of families, the majority of teachers and staff, would you say those are strong majorities?
It depends on the area, but it's definitely majority and stronger in some areas. We again looked at the overarching themes and the overarching takeaways, but in some questions it's very, very strong, and in others it's not as strong, but still a majority.
B plus.
B plus, okay. Well, just, when I see majority, I know that 51% would constitute a majority. And this is greater than the 51% sort of idea. So this isn't close to a 50-50. It's clearly a majority. That's what I wanted to hear. Very good. That's all for me.
Are there takeaways that we need to work on? That, I mean, a lot of this seems like it's fairly positive. Are there things that we can build on or that we need to bolster a little bit?
There's certainly things that were identified from all of the surveys, but for example, in terms of professional development, that we can work with our support staff on and work with teachers. So that's just one example of how we can use the data. Again, the real value for me is in that individual student data, but certainly that's going to better inform lots of interventions that we have in place, whether it's, CSSS, whether it's programming in our access period or resource period. I think that's where the heart of it is, in students, of course.
But we'll have the strategic planning group study this data too, and then identify areas for, areas to improve as well. So I think it's, like Gina said, just another data set that we can examine as we develop the plan.
I just want to say 3 things. First of all, thank you, great report. You had great responses, numbers. 2, and this is more, I think, for the board members who may not be aware of this, but right before COVID, the year before COVID, quite fortuitously, we had really beefed up on the number of social workers and counselors we had. We hired several more positions at each school, and then COVID hit. So that was quite fortuitous, and I'm very thankful that that administration had the foresight to do that.
Not the foresight of COVID, but
Not the
just
foresight.
expanding student needs, yes.
Expanding student needs for mental health. And I would also say, if you have not had, last week or the week before, I don't remember now, the Surgeon General came out with a report where he identified stressors and issues related to mental health among students. And schools, of course, were one of those, one of the areas that he identified, one of many areas. Was not limited to schools. But this is consistent with some of his recommendations and some of his queries. So just thank you for all your work, and it just came at just an excellent time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm going to dial Chris in real quick.
Okay. We're going to dial Chris Espinoza in real quick. I would offer to do it, but it's technology.
Helps if I dial it correctly.
See?
See, you should have done it, not me.
Want me to try and we can start?
It's just not making the call. I'll do it from here. Hey, Chris, we have you on speakerphone. All right. Next topic is the school report card.
I can do it.
You could do it,
That's
yes.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Really-
Out of habit, Gina.
I know. So tonight I'm going to present on the school report card, and I just want to say a few things before we start. The school report card and the presentation tonight is going to be a little bit different than in previous years. The school report card, typically we present maybe November, sometimes I think it goes even into December. And I talk about, and sometimes I've even demonstrated, what you see when you log in. It's a public report card. So anyone can go in and see the report card for really any public school. Typically, there's an at a glance, and that's a nice kind of summary of how the school is doing in several different areas. That is not available for this year, at least not yet, and I have no reason to believe that it will be available at any time. However, the school report card is still interactive, so you can go in and actually compare years, you can look at different subgroups, you can look at different topics. So a lot of the report card is the same, but some of it is different this year and was different last year as well. The report card is always evaluating. So what's released, for example, typically right around Halloween, typically on October 30th or right around Halloween, is the report card in full, right? And it takes you through many, many, many different topics. everything from test scores to mobility rates to ninth grade on track, graduation rates, so on and so forth. This year, due to COVID, the Illinois State Board of Education is releasing the report card in 3 phases. The first one occurred right around Halloween. The second one occurred last week. And then there'll be a third one later in the spring. So that is a change. Releasing it in pieces is one change. One other change is that we will not have a summative designation. Summative designation, there's 4 possible designations. They are not calculating it this year. So when you log in, for example, or when you go into the site, it will just say no summative designation calculated. And just like last year when I presented, there's language all over the report card in many different areas that either says possible COVID-19 impact to 2021 data or that the 2021 data is delayed due to COVID-19. So to give you an example, possible COVID-19 impact on data, we know that the data may be impacted by the learning models that we had, by student attendance, all those factors. So that's the first one. The second one, well, it's actually the third one there, but the first possible impact to the data, right? The second one relates more so to assessments. So in the spring, the State Board of Education gave schools the choice. We could either give, for example, at the high school level, the SAT, we could either give it last spring to juniors or give it in the fall to seniors, again, because the juniors were supposed to take it in the spring. So schools had a choice. It wasn't just for that assessment, it was also for the Illinois Science Assessment and Access, which tests for EL students. We opted to give the SAT in the spring to our juniors. So tonight I'm going to present some preliminary SAT data. For some schools that just gave it this fall, their data may not be there because they just gave the assessment a month or 2 ago. So that's why you see 2 different data kind of disclaimers on the report card. So the 3 main parts that were released in October were graduation rates, which I talk about every year with the board, ninth grade on track, which I also talk about with the board, and they made it a point to say mobility rates. I'm going to talk tonight about graduation rates and ninth grade on track, as I always do. Not really going to touch on mobility rates because even with COVID, our mobility rates are flat. So in other words, there's not a difference from previous years. We typically range somewhere between 4% and 6%. So not much of a change. And there hasn't been, we don't see huge variances. So we'll talk about graduation rates and we'll talk about ninth grade on track. Graduation rates, looking at obviously the last 5 years. We know that last year's rates, 2020, also had the COVID-19 disclaimer about the data. And I know I presented that last year. The state does a 4-year, 5-year, and a 6-year graduation rate. So for the 4-year rate, these are students who entered in the year 2017, entered school in the fall of 2017. And as you can see, our graduation rate has pretty much been it's a little bit lower this year, but it's been approximately 93% or within that. And you'll also notice that the state went down by 2%. We went down by 1.4% when you're comparing graduation cohorts or classes of students. The 5-year graduation rate, we typically do not focus on as much. We still look at it, of course. We still analyze the data. But it's not necessarily a focus area. These are actually students who entered in 2016. So when they calculate a graduation rate for the 5-year, they're taking the students who were kind of left that didn't graduate, and did they graduate in their 5th year? Mm-hmm. This also includes special education students who go on, for example, to T99. Okay. While the student may have completed their graduation requirements while they were at North or South High School, we cannot mark a student as graduated. If we want the student, and if the student's family obviously wants the student to go to T99. Because once you mark a student as graduated, they're no longer your student. You can't have them as a student. So for some of these students, clearly not all of the students, will be special education students that fall in the 5-year. And you can see we're pretty much in the range of where we've been.
And I want to point out a quick weird
I'm sorry.
data thing with what Gina just mentioned about special education students. Those that aren't finishing their career in 4 years will always show in those 5th or 6th or 7th year data set, but that means that your 4-year data set can never be 100.
Oh, they're not
Right.
backed out.
Because
point.
they don't back that out of the
Okay.
numbers, they're
Yeah.
included in the larger numbers. So all of these students that are in the 5th year weren't in the 4th year, and the great majority of those students are because they never had a 4-year graduation plan to begin with, right? So the way that the state data, it looks, it's kind of weird that they don't back that set of students out and show you, well, these are the students we expected to graduate in 4 years, and this is how many of those students actually did. It is all students, knowing that because of students' specific individual plans, it's never going to be 100%, right? You know, we have 13% of our students in a special education program, right? The great majority of them still graduate in 4 years, but there is a subset that never intended to, that isn't the plan.
Right.
So I just want to make sure, you know, as people look at that, it's like, oh, our goal should be 100. The way the data works, it'll never be 100.
No.
Do we know what, like, for the 4-year plan, do we know approximately what it is if you do back out those students?
We have not calculated it that way.
Okay.
We could. I could go back and go student by student. If you'd like me to do that, I can do that. We just haven't done that.
Intuitively,
And
you
we-
know that the percentage would be higher.
Would be higher.
It's going to be higher for
It
sure.
would be higher, yeah.
But mind you, some of these 5-year graduation rate are general education students. They're not all special education students. I don't want you to think that. And we clearly have communicated, at least my colleagues who deal with the state on data entry and looking at data, how it would be nice if there was some way not to count those students who are going on for transitional services. Because we are meeting their need.
Right.
And they're,
Success.
in most cases, meeting the graduation requirements in 4 years. But currently, there is no way to do that because we cannot mark a student as graduated and then keep the student.
Right.
So that's why you have that impact. And they do 7-year, but usually we look at 4, 5, and 6-year. So again, that's the 6-year. And you can see, actually, we went up just a little bit in 2021. But again, those are the students. So for example, these students for the 6-year would have entered in the fall of 2015. Okay?
And we're talking small numbers of
That's
students.
Very small.
but-
So 1 or 2
Yeah.
students can change a percentage
Yeah.
Yeah.
so much, substantially.
But those students aren't going to TCD. I mean, transition.
No, a
It's
great
the
number of
5-year,
these
it's the
are.
5-year, the 4-year
No, we have students that
ones.
stay for a 6-year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So both the 5-year graduation rate and the 6-year graduation rate are impacted by that.
By T99.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We typically do not have many, if any, general education students that remain on for a 6-year because we look at alternatives for those students,
Right.
like a GT type program or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, we're not seeing in the 6-year. Not to say it couldn't happen. We might have even an EL student, for example, who stays on to meet other requirements or improve language. There could be some reasons, but that's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. Okay? So 9th grade on track. 9th grade on track is something we've been looking at and the buildings have been looking at extensively. 9th grade on track used to be called freshman on track, so if I use that interchangeably, that is why I got used to years of calling it freshman on track. For the state to consider a 9th grader to be on track, they must earn 5 credits their freshman year. Does not count, they do not count summer school. And they cannot fail more than 1 semester of a core course. And the state looks at core courses basically as English, reading, math, social studies, or science. So we can have a student, for example, that might have 6.5 credits, but if they failed a full year of a core course, they would not be considered on track. That student could go to summer school, get the credit, and in our way of looking at it, be on track for sophomore year, have the credits, have passed all their classes, but would not be considered a ninth grader on track. So as we look at our ninth grade on track numbers, and this ninth grade on track is a key indicator of high school success. It's very important that we intervene early with students. There's definitely a correlation between students who enter as ninth graders and are on track by either this measure or internal measures and graduation rate. There is a direct link. So we certainly want to intervene as soon as we can. And as you can see, our numbers went up last year in 2020. As you know, we basically with COVID, many students were able to pass.
In that first spring, remember?
That first spring.
The state eliminated failures and made a lot of changes in a result to that first spring.
But that was not the case last year. So you'll notice that our freshman on track number went down to 90%. So when I looked at the 1,208 freshmen that counted in our freshman on track number, we may have had at any given time in the year more than 1,208 freshmen, but they have to be with us for a certain period of time in order to count. When I looked at those students and kind of backed out those that went to summer school, which is not the way the state calculates it, it's what I wanted to look at to see if those students made up enough credits and in the right courses in order to be considered on track for sophomore year. Mind you, that's not going to show in our data. I also looked at that in part because we had more than double the students in summer school last year. So we would expect that there would be a correlation. We found that of those students, about almost 25% made up a credit or half a credit in a course that put them at 5 credits and only failing 1 semester, or in some cases, no semesters, obviously, not a semester, of a core course. If we were to calculate it that way, we'd actually be at 93%, which is consistent with what we were in the beginning. I share that with the board because the board did decide to waive summer school tuition last year. Yep. And I wanted to share that at least for this small subset, and I know it's a small subset of students, they were able to recoup credit enough to be on track, while not by this figure, it's not going to appear on the report card, but clearly going into their sophomore year.
That is very reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. Because that 90%.
And we've decided administratively, we're making our own metrics for 10th grade on track, 11th grade on track, so that we can track this cohort of students year by year now, and then future groups, and be able to start to provide our own internal metrics to the board as to, this is a great benchmark, but how do we continue to perform through, the entire student's career? So look for that in future years.
So as I said, the school report card is being released in 3 phases. The second phase was a little more than a week ago on December 2nd. They were supposed to release 2 major data sets. One was preliminary assessment data. For us, that would be SAT. You may recall that the state canceled PSAT 8, 9, and 10 last year. So we didn't even have an option to give that test. We had an option to move a couple of tests if we wished. SAT, which we chose not to do. We wanted juniors to have a reportable score to colleges. So we made the decision, the administration, to do that test last April. However, we did decide to move the Illinois Science Assessment, which is not for college entrance. It's not a college entrance exam. And we did move that and administered that this fall. So for this release, we do have preliminary SAT data for us. The state is not calculating it. The state's not calculating it yet because there's still assessments out there that are being that are being graded, obviously. So a state average is not determined yet. So when I show you this data, I can't show you state data because it's just not available yet. Okay. They were also supposed to release College Career Ready, which is, you may recall, a series of indicators, includes things like GPA, attendance, dual credit, transition math classes, and then a number of other career indicators. For example, students have to have a 4-year plan, working 2 consecutive summers, working during the school year, community service, a whole list of different indicators. Activities, athletic, I mean, there's a ton of different. And it was a huge data set. We spent, I will just say, hundreds of hours working on those data sets to find out that they decided after the fact not to release the data. And they decided not to release the data for a couple of reasons I'll talk about in just a minute. But those were the 2 things that were supposed to be released. Only SAT data was released. So this data here that I'm showing is just the last few years. You'll notice 2020 is missing. That's not because I forgot about 2020. That is because the SAT was not given in 2020. Meaning the state sponsored, the state administered. Some students may have gone and taken the SAT or the ACT even, but it just wasn't administered as a state assessment in 2020. So that's why it is missing. And while really, we have to keep in mind that these are different cohorts of students, okay? So, for example, 2021 are juniors. So that's the class of 2022. 2019, right, juniors in 2019, class of 2020. We're not comparing how a student did on, for example, PSAT 89 to PSAT 10 to SAT. That's a comparison of growth. These are different cohorts of students. So we really can't compare the data. However, I do know that the board likes to see how our SAT, or how our students are doing, on the SAT. But they are different groups of students. This isn't the same group of students. It's not like they went down or up at any given point. So it's really not comparable data sets, but I wanted to show how our students did. And again, that was last spring. Some students are going, or did take, the schools that decided to push SAT to the fall, those students' scores may be higher because students are a little older, perhaps learned more.
Yeah.
But I can't say that that will be the case. They could be higher, they could be lower, they could be the same. So this is just an example of how our students did. This is, again, the average all students.
So
And this
just
is
to
both
say-
evidence, sorry.
I'm sorry, Gina, I cut in. But just to say what Gina just said differently, you're looking at the end here for each of these student groups. You don't know where each of these groups started, right? And with them, Gina mentioned earlier, with the state series being canceled over several years of the PSAT 8 and 9, we don't even have that data to know, did this group of
Did they
students
improve?
perform as expected or go backwards, or it's data that's lost to time right now because of COVID. So it's impossible to extrapolate out, did we do an amazing job with this group of students because they started out much further behind, or did we not? But it's information for information's sake at this point.
So this is the combined average of, there's 2 parts, evidence-based reading and writing and the math section. So that's combined. And then I just wanted to give you a sense of ELA and math scores again and this is district and again averages. So for example, in 2021 for ELA, 530.9 and then 532.6 for math. And again, different cohorts, so not necessarily comparative, but just trying to give you a sense of how the class of 2022 did when they took it in the spring of 2021. And then looking just at ELA scores, again, the same idea, different cohort, but to kind of give you an idea of where our students, or how our students in general, again, in district average performed. I realize state of Illinois is missing, but that's because they haven't calculated that yet, as I said just a few minutes ago. And then the same for math. Our ELA scores, I'm sure you noticed, were pretty much, I should have said that, I'm sorry, pretty consistent. And math did go down a little bit.
What are you doing with this information?
With the data?
Yeah, other than just share. I mean,
We definitely analyze the data. We definitely look at the data. I don't do a lot with it at this kind of very global level, but we tend to look at data more broken down by groups of students. And we certainly can use that information as we're working with interventions and working with students. We don't look a lot at this really global data, right? Even if you go into the school report card, you can go in and break it down in different groups of students.
So a
So-
drop of 40 points doesn't give you,
Not without knowing where
Yeah,
the
where they
kids started
started.
from, right? And that's
Right.
what we're typically looking at is
Right.
almost down student by student level or student group level as to where did they start, where did they go, what did we do that might have impacted that. But without that, I mean, obviously a dip in scores, it's going to be impossible to separate our instructional practices from just the world of COVID, right? You know, so what do we know from what we're looking at here? If we look at what we expect out of students generally, year to year, although that's not the best comparison, we know that where we typically are, we're slightly lower now. And it's a combination of the world probably that we're in, you know, but I can't tell you definitively that that's the case. This could have been a group of students that overall started lower than this group. It also could have been a group that started way higher.
Right.
COVID knocked them down even further than we would have expected, right? So it's just, it's an impossibility to extrapolate out really what this means instructionally for us. It's just, this is how this class did.
When we used to use the ACTs, it was, you know, we had years and years of, you know, that whole series of tests. And so the data, I don't think is as useful now as it used to be because,
no,
because you had this group
2017.
coming in ninth grade, right? Every year you had a different group of students coming in and you could test and say, okay, here's where they are today. And then we were used to hearing reports of, you know, okay, see, you know, here's where they are, here's where they got to in the 10th grade. And you can design your interventions and helps for those cohorts around how they're progressing so that, and you can project where you think they're going
That was
to
the key part,
be.
Mike, was we knew that what the projected growth for a student should be expected to
Right.
be, and then where they actually ended up, and then we could look and figure out where did we go wrong or where did we go right.
What really worked well, and,
Yeah.
then you can use that again. And
Without
so,
the longitudinal data, this is very limited value to us, you know. Hopefully we, you know, this year we'll get back to that state series, and now we can start rebuilding longitudinal data. I think the data sets that are more important to us now, whether it's the on-track data, graduation rates,
Sure.
those kinds of things, because those are true metrics that we know are for kids that are progressing appropriately and then hitting the ultimate goal of graduating from high school. So, you know, this state data doesn't factor in all of the other things that are in place. It's just one data point.
again, like this is a group of students who've had their schedules tossed
Yeah.
around and
Sure.
and now
And
you know,
lived
you're
through a
gonna-
pandemic and back and forth at school
Yeah,
and
so it
things
just
in life.
seems like
and-
if you don't have that data, these students are sort of left hung out to dry without
Just like 2020, there's no data.
without any
None.
metric.
Right,
Yeah, no
yeah,
whatsoever.
so,
You're,
yes.
you're right.
I mean, a couple good things. As Dr. Thiele said, we are planning to administer, and the state has said this many times, 8-9 for freshmen in April, 10 for sophomores, and then, of course, the SAT. So we'll be hopefully back for good to getting that, and we can start looking at some comparisons in terms of growth of cohorts of students. The other thing that I think was a wise decision that we made was in October, giving the PSAT 10/NMSQT, which typically just a small group of students take to qualify for national merit. But we, through ESSER funds, decided to administer it to all juniors. So at least they'll have had the experience of taking a college board assessment.
Okay. Well, that's
So
kinda what
I'm
we've been-
hopeful.
I've been saying we're not giving final exams, we're not giving hour and a half or more tests, so they aren't getting these environments, you know, to function in until it really matters for the student, and that's what's, I think, kind of disappointing.
Yeah, adding in the testing in the fall and then the state series moving forward brings that back into place.
Yeah.
I also wonder if you know, knowing that the SAT and ACT, that there's much less emphasis on that for college admission, and in some cases, not even needed, it becomes less of a high-stakes test, and a student's motivation to take that required test at school, maybe they're not putting in as much effort because it's not as a high stakes. I mean, that could factor in. I'm speculating.
There's a lot of variables here.
But that would also seem to be maybe a contributing factor as well.
That's why getting back to the series and
Would really help.
Look at student by student, what happened versus what was expected, and have those conversations is the true data set that's valuable to us. I mean, this just shows you how they did on that one day during the pandemic.
Right.
You know, and that's what it is.
Well, I look forward to getting that series back because, time and time again, we were exceeding the projections. We knew we were, making a real difference in these students' lives because we knew where they were and we knew where they were projected to be. And then when they ended up outperforming that, you have some satisfaction that all this hard work is really paying off. So I miss not being able to see that and wondering, because this actually could be, for all we know, this is a huge success. Comparatively. I mean, we don't know that.
We don't know.
We don't know.
And as I said, Mike, it could be a terrible loss. We don't know. I mean, it's just impossible to guess. Or it could be spot on as to what would have been predicted. There's no way to possibly know. It's just a data set that is what it is.
Oh, okay.
So as I mentioned, decided not to release the data. I expect that next year, the state will be ready to release data. The reasons that and it was originally scheduled for December 2nd, and it wasn't until about a week later, in fact, that we found out that it was not going to be released, and these were just some of the reasons that they cited, that it was the first year reported, that they were very complex data sets, that there could be an impact in the data in COVID-19, and that the preliminary data was proving not to be reliable or valid. So they decided not to release that data. So really, this second release was really the preliminary, and they're calling them preliminary, not final.
Okay.
Preliminary SAT scores.
So is this a delay or just they're not
releasing at all?
So we're not going to have any until 2022?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, I can only assume that they will next year. This has been something that's been years in the making. So I'm hopeful that if we're submitting all this data, that they will then release the data. But I can't speak for
They also
for the
found
state.
in this collection that some of the assumptions, just as you always do when you gather data, right? Some of the assumptions that they made going into that data set didn't reflect what they thought it did.
Oh.
So I think you might even see some changes in that readiness formula after they've had this dry run and they've seen, now they've seen this large data set and how schools actually collect it and what it looks like. I think you might see a few kinds of tweaks and changes in the assumptions that were made. They expected to see a certain type of data come that didn't come, and it comes back to the assumptions that were made and how it was collected at the beginning. So I think you're going to see a few changes over the course of this year, and consider that, the state will consider that the dry run.
So
and
this
then-
has never been done before?
Never been done before.
And when was it originally? Was this supposed to be the first time?
This was supposed to be, yeah. So.
So I just,
Timing
I'm
was
sorry.
kind of.
So I just listed some of the interventions just to show, like I said about the summer school tuition, that was something that the board supported. Obviously, paper tutoring, the number one area that we are seeing students using paper for is math. We also have expanded our math programming. We now have a second math specialist at South High School, so we now have 2 math specialists. One of whom actually works quite closely with students who are homebound for any reason. If they're out of school, he will actually work remotely with the students. So that's a great support. We are using the Alex courseware and PPL with numerous thousands of students. So I just put those up there to just kind of reminder that a lot of these are focused on math. Not all of them, but several are. And then the final release is scheduled right now. Of course, this is tentative. But this is what ISB is saying. It will be released on April 27th. The final assessment data, including the state level, remember, there was no bar there because we didn't have that, SAT, the ISA, Illinois Science Assessment, and then the dynamic learning maps, which is, we call it the DLM. It's the alternative for those students who do not take, those special needs students who do not take the SAT. So this is the next release that's expected in the spring.
And this, once again, won't look or correlate to anything in the past, as you have groups of students like ours that we chose to give the assessment in the spring because that's what's best for kids, to get that test under their belt, to know if they want to take it again for a different score, for any of those kinds of things. If we were looking out for us
Right.
as a school district,
We would've waited.
you could have just put that all off and done this here in the fall and given kids a longer period of time to gain content, get back into school, get back into the flow, into the mindset, all of that. And you would imagine that our scores, just by doing that, would be higher than they are right now. So when we look at state average, this will be a year that you can compare to no other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Are we going to look at summer school tuition?
Yeah, we look at that in January.
Okay.
Yep, we'll have a summer school report for you at that point. All right, but good.
Thank you, Gina.
Good transition, though, Jenny. On the consent agenda tonight is a job description for a Director of Student Experiences. This is a new administrative position at the district level. Part of the salary for this position is being offset by transitioning our summer school coordinator into this position. One of the board's long-term goals has been to expand summer school and summer school offerings. We expanded it just by necessity a great deal last year. So that is a key part of this position, as well as a variety of things that support students throughout the day with activities, athletics, all kinds of support from the district level, interventions. And this is also the person that needs to start siphoning off Gina's knowledge as she is in the retirement contract. And we need to offload as much of Gina's knowledge as possible before she rides off into the sunset. So this starts creating a level of redundancy for that transition as well. So if the board approves that under consent tonight, probably at some point this week, we'll get that job posting out before winter break so that we can get that out and start gathering interested professionals for that opening. Any questions on that one?
No.
All right. In November, the board attended the joint annual conference. This is the board meeting where traditionally board members have shared anything of interest that they took away from it. I know we had a few folks in the room attend. Anything that
People want to bring it up?
looks like
Yeah, I took a lot of notes.
his notes.
See what I might,
I will share something administratively that came up. As the board knows, this year we left the National School Lunch Program. And by all accounts, students love the change in the menu and everything that's there. But one of the byproducts of that is last year when we were in the National School Lunch Program, because of the support that's happening during COVID, students were provided the opportunity to get meals for winter break and pick up a meal box and have that over break. One of the conversations that came up at the conference was, how are we supporting students with food needs over long extended breaks? So as a result of that, the administrative team came back and worked with Chartwell's, our food service provider, and Jeree and Jill put in a lot of work to find students that would be interested in that kind of support. And then the district has provided that option for families to take advantage of this year. So, got our wheels turning of, hey, last year at this time, we provided this level of support. Should we do that again this year? We decided that if we would have been in the food lunch program, families would have had access to that. So we decided to offer that. Long-term, we're going to have discussions with community providers as to how we partner with the resources that are already here in the community and support and promote those entities to help with food over extended breaks. So, it's one of those things that got the wheels turning, and we were able to pivot and provide that kind of support to families that need it.
You say that was the second general session?
That was the second general
right.
session, yeah.
Right, I thought, food insecurity for poor students being such a big issue for college students, especially during their breaks. And that was something that I hadn't really thought about before. When they tell my kid they've got to be out by a certain date, what happens if the kid doesn't have anywhere to go? And it got me thinking too. I attended a session called "What's Race Got to Do with It?" and my takeaway from that was needing to understand my own personal experience and culture before I can really relate to others, which I thought was interesting because I've never spent a lot of time thinking about my own, culture. I attended a session on IHSA updates. They talked about a 35-second clock maybe coming to basketball in 2022 or 2023. And there were a lot of issues around masks wearing. Some things that didn't make sense to me. And seemed like some disconnection between IHSA and Illinois Department of Public Health. Attended a session about tips for successful board policy committee members. Didn't get much out of that. Stuff I mostly knew. Another session called No Weak Links, Fostering Positive Intra-Board Relationships, and talking about us needing to have a strategic plan. It should be a working document, updated annually. And he wrote here the rest of the meeting was just typical board role and conduct stuff that I already knew. And then that third general session was entitled Unconscious Bias in Education. And I talked about unconscious bias being everywhere, being in everyone, that we all inherently have some sort of unconscious bias that we're not really even aware of. And you can't avoid it. I mean, everybody has it. It's just how you were raised and the people you were around and your life and your experience, things that you haven't even thought about. This is the way it is, and then you go, wait a minute. They talked about. The presenter talked about starting to say, so what, when you're evaluating choices. So that, why is it a big deal? If somebody says something, you should think about what's really behind that. And it said here, she also suggested, I thought this was an interesting tip about trying to reverse your initial stereotype. So like, whatever your response is to something, try to think about it, like, if my response was the exact opposite, how would that make me feel about it? Sometimes that can change your perspective on what it is, maybe reaching some empathy that you wouldn't have otherwise. So, all in all, it was actually a better conference than I thought was going to be. I have to confess, I had kind of low expectations going into it. Because of COVID and those general sessions, typically I look for something, some really motivational stuff there, and I didn't know that this would be so much, but I thought it was, and so all in all, a good conference. So I don't know if that sparked anybody else?
Did you want to say something about sports? Well, no, because Mike went to the same one, and in fact, I think our minds were like in a lot of the things because we all went to some of the same presentations.
Not planned.
No,
Yeah.
Just working.
no, we didn't
Interesting.
talk to each other
I
about
went to
it.
some of the same ones he.
But because of where we are, I thought a lot of it would be repetitious, just because I think that we're a very responsive board and that we communicate well and so some of those sessions were not necessary for what we
Well, and this
do.
board's done a lot of professional development outside of the conference. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sessions there that, there's boards that is their only professional development opportunity. So I could see where, you know, some of the basic training and those kinds of things, you've already received this in, you know, other workshops. So, I mean, that's why you got the Distinguished Governance Award, right? So, all of those, naturally, none of you would need to go to, so you'd get funneled towards
But I
other
did go to the
sections.
ISHA thing too, and I thought it was a lot about football.
Yes. A lot of football and basketball conversations.
Lot of football, you know, when they're gonna start practicing and, you know, that kind of stuff. So, but I felt a lot of it was not voted on yet. These were just
Right,
things that they were bringing forward. So,
getting ready for next year's seasons.
yeah, and, you know, how they were gonna put schools into brackets,
Mhm.
you know, because
Oh, yes, the unfairness dealing with some of the private
right,
schools.
you know,
and
I mean, I look at
rate
my,
things.
alma mater, it's gone from, you know, 3 different categories, you know, from, you know, 2A, 3A, 4A. And so the competition is a lot different at each
Mhm.
level. And so,
Chris and Cheryl were both there as well. So I don't know if Christopher's still remote there, but if he's got anything he wants to add, possibly.
Chris, was there anything you wanted to add from the conference?
Yeah, just sort of piggybacking off what they said. I sat in on a mental health in like student services session, and I sat in on a student safety plan session, sort of addressing some of the concerns that were in one of the resolutions that the IASB delegates voted on, which was sort of like addressing how to preemptively be prepared for situations in schools of violence, especially at the time it hadn't occurred yet, but in light of everything that went on a couple of weeks ago, that session was really interesting in how I think it was Yorkville attempted to address active threats preemptively and sort of how they build relationships with students through some of their resource officers. The whole thing was really interesting.
All right. All right, well, thank you, board members, for attending and continuing to grow as board members. We'll have a spring DuPage offering, and that will be at South High. We'll be hosting.
I thought it was at, no?
Or North High. Are we at
North High.
North High. North High. We'll be at North High.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Enough information?
FOIA requests, we've had them, and we respond to them, and they're available up on the website.
Okay, we're going to move to the consent agenda, but before we do ask for approval, I would like to just recognize once again, the district, one of the elements on here is a acceptance of a donation from the District 99 Education Foundation grants. The foundation came through once again with $1,200 for both grants for South, one for their fine arts program, a guided study for program graduates, and the other, a cry-cut for the multi-needs program for special education. So please share our thank you again with the with the board. Does anybody else wish to pull something out of the consent agenda before we vote? Hearing none, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes the personnel report, transfer position classified, appointments classified, leave of absence classified, the personnel report, retirements classified, resignations classified, the increased substitute wages for former full-time DG99 CMG and support staff employees, the financial pages, the waiving of the first reading and adoption of Board Policy 3.70, Director of Student Experiences, and the acceptance of the donation of the District 99 Education Foundation grant.
So moved.
Second.
Terry and Mike?
Thank you. Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye. The consent agenda carries. Next, we'll move on to action items. We need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the certificate of tax levy, the certification of the certificate of tax levy, and the certificate of compliance with the truth in taxation law as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Terry and Mike?
Thank you. Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza. Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next, I need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the 2022-2023 curriculum proposals as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Joanna and Terry.
Thank you very much. Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza. Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Moving on is the reception of visitors' public comment. This is the second reception of visitors, which is intended for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes to provide all visitors an equal opportunity to address the board. Individuals needing more time should submit their thoughts in writing to the board secretary, Mrs. Nidak. Prior to addressing the board, audience members should state their full name. The proceedings are being tape recorded and live streamed for the purpose of producing accurate meeting minutes, and is being live streamed. And I reserve the right to modify these protocols if circumstances warrant. Audience observation of these protocols is appreciated. Who do we have first?
All right, we have 7 slips at 3 minutes apiece. We're definitely under the 30 minutes, so I will just call them in the order in which they were submitted and not separate residents from non-residents. So the first person up to speak is Rich Brennan, followed by Noel Manley will be the next speaker.
I'm Rich Brennan, a Downers Grove taxpayer. Everyday resistance to mask mandates and forced vaccinations and rules that isolate children to supposedly stop COVID, that resistance is growing because medical news that opposes the Anthony Fauci method and policies is increasing daily. For example, very interesting, Brown University did a study that shows that there's a 23% decline in early childhood development under traditional social distancing and masking mandates. Interesting read. The COVID policies we follow here come from Anthony Fauci's National Institute of Health. The same Fauci who sent our tax dollars to the Wuhan laboratory and successfully weaponized previously obscure bat viruses. And then Fauci lied about it. So from the NIH to the Pritzker government here to District 99, there's a track for that. And that explains why we don't trust a lot of the Fauci-Pritzker followers on masking and vaccination recommendations. Typical of the opposition literature, Julius Rochelle from Canada wrote about the snake oil salesman and the COVID zero con bait and switch. He does a good job of explaining. For example, lockdowns, mass vaccinations, and mass booster shots interfere with our immune system's ability to protect us from 200 other respiratory viruses, and it creates a dangerous set of circumstances that risk driving mutations that are more dangerous to the vaccinated and unvaccinated alike. The promise of vaccines is the exit strategy is really an never-ending regimen of annual booster shots to replace our natural antivirus security updates that come from handshakes, hugs, and children laughing in schools. Our immune system depends on these challenges to get in small doses daily to get stronger, especially children. And a key example to check out yourselves, in New Zealand, they're ultra strict regulations, their ultra strict masking and quarantines and lockdowns have resulted in hospitals full of children with non-COVID viruses because the government isolation policies left them fragile. Thanks.
Next is Noel Manley, followed by Carol Jean Davis.
Good evening. My name is Noel Manley, and I'm from Deering, Illinois. The United States is not a racist country, and District 99 is not a racist community. However, the woke culture promoted by the D99 administration and school board would have you believe otherwise. Here's a list of issues brought before the board over the last 7 months that have been summarily dismissed or ignored. So much so that the board has unlawfully surrendered its authority regarding school board meeting attendance to the superintendent. Number 1, anti-police lessons in English and social study courses. A biracial student being told by her English teacher to check her white privilege at the door. Blindly following Governor Pritzker's mask mandates with no challenge at all. This administration will sacrifice student mental health in the face of state funding threats. The textbook used in Downers Grove North government class openly advocates for open borders and downplays the atrocities of the Russian Revolution. A student recently was removed by his class by a woke teacher because the student had a political slogan on his shirt with which the teacher disagreed. This incident was so brazen that school administration and parents had to get involved. The 105-page, $27,000 2020 equity audit report, which attempts to promote the tired concept of institutional racism as a primary issue facing the district. Who needs 60 years of racial progress and academic excellence when an equity curriculum will readily promote and review that every issue stems from race and every solution is race-based? And then we have the sexually graphic genderqueer. Another example of woke activists throwing their agenda in front of children. You will note there is no graphically heterosexual equivalent in the library shelves of either Downers Grove North or Downers Grove South. So perhaps our woke librarians may be interested in placing copies of the Kama Sutra or Ovid's Metamorphoses on the D99 library shelves. Of course, not placing such sexually explicit books on these shelves may be considered censorship. So what are the results of this woke culture that D99 is participating in? And just look what's happening in the streets of DuPage County. Carjackings are up weekly. In fact, there was one right down the street from Downers Grove North at the BP Mamco. You've got gangs looting and hitting Oak Brook Mall. We have a Downers Grove North graduate working as a Chicago police officer murdered during a routine traffic stop. And we have former DuPage County Democrat Party media coordinator Mary Lemansky equating the Waukesha Christmas Parade massacre with a jury verdict, which she did not agree. Unhappily, to her, the injury of 60 people and the murder of 6, including a child,
Mr.
serves
Manley,
as
you're out of
retribution.
time. Thank you.
I'll retire.
The next speaker is Carol Jean Davis, followed by Marcella Cherveau.
Good evening. I'm Carol Jean Davis, and I'm a resident of District 99. And I wanted to make a comment on the climate survey that was discussed tonight. I am in favor of this type of survey. It is very important to have data that provides a glimpse into both the working and learning environment as it is experienced by all of the players in the district. The survey helps to point out deficits and can aid in targeted staff training and professional development. Even if it doesn't result in specific training, it probably has an effect on how teachers relate to their students, and hopefully all of the staff and faculty will read over the results. I grew up in a dysfunctional family. I remember after one particularly horrible incident, I went to my high school guidance counselor, who was incredibly uncomfortable and nervous by what I was telling him. He was completely unprepared for what I unloaded on him and basically said he pretty much just helps people find colleges. And I left disappointed but relieved because I had finally told another adult. Later that day, I was called back to the office, and he was more helpful, and he gave me some phone numbers to call, which I did. So to parents who are against surveys like this, it gives me great pause. Maybe many of them just live in Ozzie and Harriet lives and have no idea how miserable some high school students are, and that they need real help. Who knows? But I will tell you this, my life back then certainly needed interfering with. And whether you like it or not, teachers need to be trained and prepared to deal with all sorts of situations. Surveys like this help districts prepare in a fact-based manner by identifying the biggest issues faced by staff, teachers, students, and parents. When students are upset by situations in their home life or their school life, They cannot learn. They cannot concentrate. They are in a perpetual state of fight or flight. In such a state, they are at increased risk for drug and alcohol abuse and self-harming behavior. They can manifest in a variety of ways. Schools need to know if students feel safe, welcome, and valued, and if they don't feel that way, why don't they? And students need to know that they are listened to and cared for. For district parents that question this survey, your input is also sought. And unlike other participants, you are afforded the opportunity to give free-form responses, and I hope that you take advantage of that opportunity. I would also like to note that student participation in this survey is optional. 3,133 students responded. It's clear to me that the students want to be heard, and we should listen to them. Thank you.
Next up, Marcella Chervaux, followed by Tabitha Irvin.
My name is Marcella Durdick-Charay. I'm a 26-year district resident. I have children who graduated from down or south and grandchildren I hope will never set foot in this district. During that time, I've been labeled a conspiracy theorist, though I've recently been promoted to domestic terrorist because I have the audacity to exercise my right to confront elected officials and state agencies in order to protect the rights of parents to make health decisions for their children. It's nothing more than a desperate attempt to discredit and dehumanize those of us who don't agree with overreaching policies, a suppression tactic meant to dissuade citizens from participating in the democratic process. The rhetoric and escalating aggression prove the COVID narrative continues to collapse. I will not apologize if any of you on the board or in this audience are uncomfortable or deem what I say is hateful. It's not hate to speak the truth. What's actually taking place is censorship. It is used as a tool when lies finally lose their power. Schools are no longer educational institutions, not by a long shot. They've been hijacked by and are beholden to government. Basic forensic accounting and a quick perusal of the state code confirm it. Mandates have no place in a free society. Masks are a lie. We know it, you know it. Quarantine and lockdown without court order is false imprisonment. Forced and coerced vaccination is medical rape. Breakthrough cases are not by any means a new phenomenon. It's known as vaccine failure. Contact tracing is predatory, disturbing, and intrusive. Vaccine passports are a form of discrimination and segregation. And sick until proven healthy is no less tyrannical than guilty until proven innocent. It is pure cowardice to applaud these measures in the name of personal safety. We should be standing in solidarity for freedom. Rather than bring in extra security and have reinforcements on standby as you did last month, I'd suggest you convene to your safe spaces if the truth is too much for you to handle. Better yet, step down. Let real Americans, those who value freedom and respect individual rights, do the job of which you are clearly incapable.
Next up is Tabitha Irvin, followed by Eileen Briner.
Okay, so, hello, my name is Tabitha Irvin, and I am a junior at Downers Grove North. And I'm here today just to briefly reiterate what I spoke about at last month's board meeting, which is the topic of student representation. And I will first, once again, thank Jade and Scarlett for their tenacity, courage, and commitment to representing DGN and DGS respectively. And despite your amazing work, I still believe that no two students can possibly and holistically represent a collective population of around 5,000 students, which is why I'm here today. So to the Board of Education members, thank you, but I hope that you'll listen to what I say now. With increased student representation, many to most of your questions, I believe, can be easily answered. Have the new CSSS services actually made a difference in students' mental health? Do students actually support the proposed hybrid schedule for next year, and to what extent? Do students find SATs and other standardized tests necessary for their academic success after high school? And can we better analyze the results of these tests? And what about the final exam schedule, or lack thereof? And do we find the content presented in our curriculums problematic, or the books in our library offensive? The answers to these seemingly difficult questions, with increased student board representation, can be answered in an accurate, in-depth capacity. After last month's board meeting, I received a large amount of positive support for my speech, and so in hopes of my message reaching a larger audience, created a petition titled Increase Student Representation at Illinois District 99 Board of Education Meetings, which is circulating on the change.org platform. It currently has 268 signatures and is still growing. I personally witnessed multiple classmates on opposite sides of the political spectrum sign my petition, which proves that increasing student representation at Board of Education meetings is not a partisan issue or one that should be subject to debate. I believe that it's just common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Eileen Briner, followed by Laura Hoyce.
President, good evening. First, I'd like to express my extreme disappointment in Superintendent Hank Thiele's usurping the rights of residents by not following the Open Meetings Act. He took it upon himself to move the school board meeting to a location that allows only 20 seats for the public. This district has multiple possible locations that are large enough to handle the citizens who want to attend. This mandate was not presented to the board and voted on at a subsequent meeting. I was at the November meeting. I did not see violence or threats of violence. This is just hyperbole from Hank. I'm asking for the resignation of Superintendent Thiele for this overreach of authority. Now, on to what I originally planned to speak about. And there is a similarity in the two scenarios. By now, you all know that in September, the National School Board Association sent a letter to President Biden requesting that he direct federal law enforcement to investigate parents as domestic terrorists. On October 4th, the U.S. Department of Justice under Merrick Garland, directed the FBI and U.S. Attorney's offices to investigate parents for harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school board members and school employees. Now, 13 states, including Illinois, have withdrawn membership from the National School Board Association, and 13 more states have distanced themselves from the same. In the years 2019, 2020, and 2021, this district has paid the National School Board Association $4,165 annually. Now that the Illinois Association of School Boards have left the National School Board Association, will this district cancel any further payments to the National School Board Association? What did we ever get for the annual payments of $4,165? The district also pays a lot of money to the Illinois Association of School Boards. In the past 3 years, 99 has sent the Illinois School Board Association
Ms. Briner,
over
your time has expired. Thank you.
$51,000.
Next up is Ms. Hoyce. Ms. Hoyce will be our final speaker of the evening.
I'm Laura. Can I hold this?
Sure.
I'm Laura Hoyce. This board's decisions have forced students to learn remotely, wear masks, quarantine when they're not sick, be shamed for conservative values, and treated differently if they're not vaccinated. These actions violate due process and District 99's own no discrimination policies, all under the guise of health and safety. This is about control, truly, all while using COVID as an excuse to take away constitutional rights and ignore the law. This has caused great harm to our children. Since the year 2017, teachers have received training on seeking educational equity and diversity training, also known as SEED, and white privilege guidance from Gary Howard. We understandably want to know how this training affects our students. We've asked how these culturally responsive, social emotional learning, equity changes affect curriculum? You've answered very few of our questions, telling us as little as possible while denying that these programs have all the tenets of critical race theory. How has equity training and the national sex education standards affected what educators are being told to teach our kids in sex education and in all other classes? We appreciate that you took the time to meet with us to answer our questions about what are you teaching in sex education, but we walked away with no information except one sheet guidance on what the state says about sex ed, but we were told that there are no sex ed books, no videos, no documents, nothing to see here. This board is aligned with the teachers' unions, plain and simple, and you're working against the parents. This board has limited public comment at this meeting, 20 people, so it can avoid hearing parents' concerns about the welfare of their children and conduct its business to satisfy the NEA and the ISBE. Public schools belong to us. We, the people, own the schools. We pay the educators to teach math and reading and merit, not to indoctrinate students, not to teach some, racist, far-left focus on equity and SEL, as if it's none of our business. You're not telling us how this is affecting our kids. Well, it is our business. Last August, District 99's anonymous complaint system, which had students go to designated teachers to tell about a problem they're experiencing, was replaced by a state program called Safe2HelpIllinois.com. Under this Safe2Help program, students can call a trusted adult at one of several state agencies who offer assistance by 24/7 phone hotline on issues about bullying.
Ms. Hoist, you're out of time.
Thank you.
That concludes the reception of visitors.
Thank you all. Okay, moving on to communication announcements, report on Legislative Education Network of DuPage. Jenny, anything?
There hasn't been any meeting since October.
Joanna, Sassy?
Not really, other than we continue to struggle with staffing, and we're trying to fill those positions as soon as we can.
That's good.
Yeah, and we're meeting Wednesday.
This Education Foundation is meeting Wednesday. And Chris, did you have anything to bring up from the IASB?
Just from the conference itself, it went pretty smoothly. A number of things we didn't end up voting on just because the committee decided that it wasn't worth voting on. The two things that we spoke at the two previous board meetings ago, Resolution 2 and 15. Resolution 2 did not pass, and Resolution 15 was not voted on. So, yeah.
Resolution 2 was the resolution allowing teachers to carry guns?
Yes.
And Resolution 15 was?
15 was lowering the age of, or raising the age of from 14 to 18. If a student has a parent who has a gun in the home, they are required to carry it or to store it in a specific way.
Storage in the home.
Storage in the home.
They decided it was out of our scope, so we weren't voting on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, upcoming board meetings, January 10th, 2022, we will have the workshop here again at 6:30, and January 24th, 2022, we will have the regular business meeting at 6:30 in the ASC.
Yay. So good to be home.
It is nice to hear.
It is. You know what? On that, I really like being able to speak with you across the
Right?
the aisle.
Feel like we're
When
meeting.
we're in a straight line like that, I really don't think that we can conduct business the way
Well,
that
yeah.
that we are supposed to
Yep.
as a board. And so I know it's inconvenient, but I really think it's the wisest thing for us to carry our business on.
It is nice to hear what everybody has to say.
Yes.
All right. We have no closed session, so we can adjourn.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So be it.
Second.
Yes.
Terry, and I'm sorry, who was the second?
I think it was
Chris.
Chris.
I didn't hear you.
Got here
that well,
just in
Chris.
time to adjourn us. Well done.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.